Have you ever been at a party surrounded by people laughing and connecting, and felt like you were watching it all happen from behind a thick pane of glass? Like everyone else got the manual on how to be human, and you're just winging it with stick figure instructions. Oh Lord, it is good to be here with you. If that opening question made your chest tighten a little, if you've ever felt like a two-dimensional drawing in a three-dimensional world, hit that like button right now. Not for me, but so I know we're in the same boat together. Because what I'm about to share with you is something I lived with for years before I even had a name for it. Let me take you back to a specific night. I was 24, standing in the kitchen of someone's apartment during what was supposed to be a casual get-together. The room was warm, filled with that low hum of overlapping conversations and occasional bursts of laughter. I had a beer in my hand that I wasn't drinking, and I was doing that thing where you pretend to be very interested in the art on the wall. You know that thing, right? Where you study a mediocre poster like it's the Mona Lisa, because looking at it is easier than joining the conversation happening 3 feet away from you. Here's what was running through my head in real time. If I walk over there, I'll interrupt their rhythm. If I wait for a pause to jump in, everyone will turn and look at me, and I'll blank on what I was going to say. If I say something funny and nobody laughs, I'll have to stand there in that silence that feels like it lasts for 17 years. So instead, I just stood there, frozen, a human statue pretending to appreciate someone's IKEA wall art. The worst part wasn't the isolation. The worst part was watching other people do it effortlessly. I watched this guy walk up to the group I was too scared to approach, say something I couldn't hear, and within seconds they were all laughing. He belonged there. He was three-dimensional. I was a stickman drawn in the margins of their story. Psychologists have a term for this, and when I discovered it, it felt like someone had finally put words to the static in my brain. It's called social surrogacy theory, but that sounds too clinical. I call it the Stickman Syndrome. It's that feeling of being present but not participating, of being technically in the room, but emotionally outside of it, of watching life happen to other people while you're stuck behind that invisible glass wall. Here's what makes it so insidious. The Stickman Syndrome isn't about being shy. Shy people want to connect but feel nervous. The Stickman Syndrome is deeper. It's a belief that you fundamentally lack the substance other people have. That you're not just nervous, you're incomplete. That everyone else is rendered in full color and depth, and you're just outlines, basic shapes. Researchers at the University of Chicago studied this phenomenon for years, looking at why some people feel chronically disconnected, even when they have friends, even when they're in relationships, even when they're objectively successful. What they found was fascinating and kind of heartbreaking. The people who felt like outsiders weren't actually less interesting or less likable than anyone else. The difference was entirely internal. They had developed what the researchers called a perceptual lens of exclusion. Let me translate that from academic speak. Your brain has basically installed a filter that interprets neutral social interactions as evidence that you don't belong. Someone doesn't immediately respond to your joke. Your brain files that under, "See, you're not funny. You're not invited to one hangout." Your brain catalogs it as, "They don't actually like you." Over time, this lens becomes so automatic that you don't even notice you're wearing it. You just accept the distorted view as reality. I want you to take a second and think about the last social situation where you felt like an outsider. Got it? Now here's the question that's going to sting a little. Was there actual evidence that people were excluding you? Or did you exclude yourself first? Did they push you outside the circle? Or did you stand just outside it, waiting for an invitation that was never going to come because they thought you wanted to be there? We talk about the psychology of connection every week here at the Confident Connection Lab. If you want to understand why you feel like an outsider and how to actually fix it, not just cope with it, make sure you're subscribed. We're building something real here, and I need you in it. Here's the brutal truth that took me years to accept. The Stickman Syndrome is a self-fulfilling prophecy. You feel like you lack dimension, so you hold back. You hold back so people don't get to see your dimension. They don't see your dimension, so they don't pull you in. They don't pull you in, so you feel like you lack dimension. Round and round the carousel goes. But here's the thing that changes everything. That glass wall you feel between you and everyone else, it's not real. I know it feels real. I know it feels thick and solid and impossible to break through. But it's a perceptual construct. It's your brain's way of protecting you from potential rejection by rejecting everyone first. And once you see it for what it is, once you name it and recognize it, you can start to dismantle it. Not overnight, not with some magic technique, but piece by piece, interaction by interaction, until one day you realize you're not watching life through glass anymore. You're in it, three-dimensional, fully rendered, human, so you've recognized the Stickman Syndrome. You know you're watching life from behind that glass wall. The obvious next step seems simple, right? Try harder to fit in. Laugh louder at jokes. Agree with more opinions. Sand down your rough edges until you're smooth enough to slip into any group without friction. Here's the thing that nobody tells you. That strategy, the one that seems so logical, is exactly what keeps you invisible. The more you try to blend in, the more you disappear. I learned this the hard way, and it cost me 2 years of my life pretending to be someone I thought people would like. I was 26, and I just started working at a tech startup. My coworkers would go out for drinks every Friday, and I desperately wanted to be part of that crew. So I studied them. I noticed they talked a lot about craft beer and indie bands I'd never heard of. I started memorizing beer styles and listening to music I didn't particularly enjoy. I trained myself to have opinions on things I didn't care about. For a few months, it worked. Sort of. They'd nod when I spoke. They'd include me in the Friday plans. But here's what I noticed in the moments when I was honest with myself. When I'd share one of my carefully researched opinions about IPAs, they'd acknowledge it and move on. But when someone else would say something genuinely weird or controversial, something authentically them, the group would lean in. The conversation would spark. I was getting acceptance, but they were getting connection. There's a concept in social psychology that explains this perfectly. And when I discovered it, it felt like someone had turned on the lights in a dark room. Researchers call it the pratfall effect, but that doesn't capture the full picture. I call it the friction point method, because what makes you interesting, what makes you memorable, what makes you belong, isn't your smoothness. It's your friction. It's the ways you don't quite fit that give people something to grip onto. Think about the people you actually feel connected to in your life, not the ones you politely interact with, but the ones where the conversation flows and time disappears. I want you to really picture one of those people right now. Got someone in mind? Now ask yourself this: do you like them because they agree with everything you say, or because they challenge you in ways that feel good? Do you remember them for blending in, or for being unmistakably themselves? Here's the paradox that breaks most people's brains. The things you think make you weird, the interests that seem too niche, the opinions that feel too specific, the sense of humor that's a little dark or a little absurd, those aren't bugs in your social software. They're features. They're the hooks that let people actually connect to you instead of just tolerating your presence. Let me break down why this works on a neurological level. When you sanitize yourself to fit in, you're essentially presenting a version of yourself that could be anyone. Your brain knows you're performing, so you can't relax. Their brains know something's off, even if they can't articulate it, so they can't fully trust you. You end up in this exhausting middle ground where you're technically included, but emotionally isolated. But when you introduce friction, when you say something that's genuinely you, even if it's weird or unpopular, something shifts. You give people permission to be specific too. You create what researchers call reciprocal authenticity. You show your dimension, and that makes it safe for them to show theirs. Suddenly, you're not two people performing politeness. You're two humans actually connecting. I tested this theory at another work event about 6 months after my craft beer phase crashed and burned. Someone asked what I'd been up to that weekend, and instead of giving the standard bland answer, I told the truth. I'd spent 4 hours on Saturday watching documentaries about failed utopian communities. Weird, right? Super niche. Not exactly cocktail party material. But here's what happened. Instead of the polite nod and subject change I expected, this woman's entire face lit up. She'd been obsessed with the Oneida community for years. We spent the next 40 minutes deep in conversation about religious communes and social experiments, and by the end of it, I had an actual friend. Not a coworker I smiled at in the hallway. A friend. The friction point method has 3 steps, and I need you to hear me clearly on this. First, identify your actual interests and opinions, not the ones you think you should have. What do you genuinely care about? What makes you lose track of time? What opinions do you hold that might be unpopular? Write them down if you need to. Make them concrete. Second, introduce them strategically, but honestly. You're not trauma dumping or being controversial for shock value. You're sharing real pieces of yourself in appropriate contexts. When someone asks about your weekend, tell them what you actually did. When a conversation touches on something you care about, contribute your real perspective. Give people something specific to connect to. Third, and this is critical, release your attachment to universal approval. Some people won't vibe with your friction points. That's not rejection. That's filtering. You're finding your people instead of exhausting yourself trying to be everyone's person. The goal isn't to be liked by everyone. The goal is to be known by someone. Here's the uncomfortable truth I had to accept. Every hour you spend trying to fit in is an hour you're not spending finding your actual tribe. The people who will really get you, who will make you feel 3-dimensional instead of flat, they're looking for your friction points. They're looking for the weird, specific things that make you you. But they can't find you if you're hiding behind a mask of acceptable blandness. The belonging you're searching for doesn't come from erasing yourself. It comes from revealing yourself and trusting that the right people will see your dimension and want more of it. It comes from being brave enough to introduce friction and patient enough to let the right people stick.